Imagine trusting someone so completely that when they tell you you're losing your mind, you believe them. These aren't just stories about murder. They're about the invisible violence that happens long before anyone dies, the kind that makes you doubt everything you know to be true. Welcome to True Crime Explorers, where we examine the cases that reveal the darkest corners of human manipulation. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our deep dives into the cases that changed everything we thought we knew about trust, control, and devastating betrayal. Today, we're exploring 10 real cases where psychological manipulation didn't just damage lives, it ended them. These stories follow a chilling pattern. Perpetrators who systematically broke down their victims' sense of reality, isolated them from help, and then escalated to murder. This investigation is based on court documents, investigative journalism, and expert psychological analysis. Understanding how manipulation escalates isn't just about looking back at tragedy, it's about recognizing warning signs and potentially saving lives. Let's begin with number 10. Case 10. Anne Moore Martin Maids, Morton, UK. In the peaceful village of Maids Morton, 83-year-old Anne Moore Martin lived a quiet, deeply religious life. She was devoted to her church and community. That faith would become the weapon used against her. Benjamin Field was a charismatic young man who befriended Anne, then began leaving handwritten notes around her home claiming they were messages from God. He convinced this devout woman that he was a divine messenger, that God himself was speaking through him. Over months, Field persuaded Anne to change her will, give him money, and cut contact with questioning family members. Investigators believe he was drugging her, making her confused and more susceptible. Though Anne died of natural causes, prosecutors argued he was plotting her murder. He was convicted for using identical tactics on her neighbor, Peter Farquhar. Case 9. Jennifer Dougherty Greensburg, Pennsylvania, 2010. Jennifer Dougherty was 30 years old, intellectually disabled, and desperate for friendship. In February 2010, she thought she'd found friends in a group of 6 people in Greensburg. Instead, she found her killers. The group befriended Jennifer, inviting her to their apartment. From the beginning, this was a trap built on manipulation. Over 3 horrific days, they subjected her to torture while gaslighting her into believing she deserved the abuse, that she was staying by choice. Jennifer's intellectual disability made her particularly vulnerable. She wanted so desperately to believe these people cared about her. On February 11, 2010, they murdered her. All 6 perpetrators were convicted and received lengthy sentences. Jennifer's mother, Sharon Bard, became a powerful advocate for people with intellectual disabilities, working to educate communities about recognizing and preventing exploitation. Case 8. Kellyanne Bates, Manchester, UK, 1996. Kellyanne Bates was only 14 when she met 32-year-old James Patterson Smith. Despite the obvious age gap, he groomed her carefully, isolating her from family and friends who recognized the danger. By 17, Kelly was completely trapped in his home. Smith spent years convincing Kelly that everything was her fault, that the escalating abuse was something she brought on herself. He controlled her reality completely. No contact with the outside world, constant psychological torture that made the physical violence seem inevitable. Neighbors heard nothing because Kelly had been conditioned to believe she deserved what was happening. In April 1996, after weeks of intensified torture, Smith murdered Kelly. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Kelly's case exposed how manipulation can make victims invisible, even when they're suffering in plain sight. Case 7. Shiori Ino, Kagawa, Japan, 1999. 21-year-old Shiori Ino was stalked relentlessly by her ex-boyfriend after she ended their relationship. But this wasn't just stalking, it was systematic psychological warfare designed to make Shiori feel she was never safe, and more dangerously, never believed. When Shiori reported the stalking to police, they dismissed her concerns. Her ex manipulated authorities, making Shiori appear paranoid and unstable. He enlisted others to harass her, creating a web of gaslighting that made her question whether she was overreacting. The psychological torture continued for months before he hired someone to murder Shiori in October 1999. Her death sparked massive public outrage and fundamental reform in Japan's stalking laws. Shiori's case revealed how institutions can become complicit in gaslighting when they fail to believe victims. Case 6. Maria Byrne, Thaden Boys, Essex, 2016. Maria Byrne discovered her husband Darren was having an affair, but when she confronted him, he didn't just deny it, he launched a campaign to make her believe she was imagining things. He manipulated family and friends into questioning Maria's perceptions, painting her as jealous and unstable. When Maria finally obtained proof of his betrayal, Darren's manipulation escalated to murder. In September 2016, he killed Maria in a staged house fire designed to look like an accident. Even as paramedics arrived, he maintained his lies, spinning elaborate stories to deflect suspicion. Darren was convicted of murder. Maria's family speaks publicly about how they wish they'd trusted her instincts instead of his convincing denials. Case 5. Ted Bundy's manipulation tactics. Ted Bundy wasn't just a serial killer, he was a master manipulator who used gaslighting as a hunting tool. He frequently posed as an authority figure or someone injured, gaining trust before revealing his true intentions. Survivors describe how Bundy made them doubt their own danger instincts. He was charming, articulate, and able to make people question what they were seeing right in front of them. His manipulation extended beyond his victims to law enforcement, judges, and the public, convincing many he couldn't possibly be guilty. Bundy's case became the template for understanding how predators use psychological manipulation to access and control victims. If you're finding these stories as compelling as I am, hit that like button. Case 4. Betty Broderick, San Diego, California, 1989. Betty Broderick's marriage to prominent attorney Dan Broderick deteriorated over years, but the psychological warfare was devastating. Dan gaslighted Betty about his affair with his assistant, convincing friends, family, and courts that Betty was unstable and irrational while he was the reasonable one. He used his legal expertise to manipulate custody battles and financial settlements, systematically dismantling Betty's credibility and support system. Every time Betty reacted to his provocation, Dan used it as evidence that she was the problem. Years of this calculated gaslighting left Betty isolated, desperate, and convinced no one would ever believe her side. In November 1989, Betty murdered Dan and his new wife. She was convicted and remains in prison, but her case sparked intense conversations about how prolonged psychological abuse can drive someone to violence. Case 3. Peter Farquhar, Maids, Morton, UK, 2015. Peter Farquhar was a 69-year-old respected author and university lecturer when he met Benjamin Field, his former student. Field initiated a romantic relationship with Peter, carefully targeting his loneliness and desire for companionship. Over 2 years, Field drugged Peter's drinks with bioethanol, making him increasingly confused and forgetful. He convinced Peter he was developing dementia, gaslighting him about conversations that never happened and events Peter couldn't remember because he'd been drugged during them. Field isolated Peter from colleagues and friends who might notice what was happening. Field persuaded Peter to change his will in his favor, then murdered him in October 2015, staging it to look like natural causes or suicide related to Peter's supposed mental decline. The investigation revealed Field's chilling level of planning. He'd written a novel about committing the perfect murder years before he targeted Peter. Field was convicted and sentenced to life with a minimum of 36 years. The case inspired the acclaimed BBC series The Sixth Commandment. Case 2. Maria Ricotta, Ugly, Essex, 2024. In January 2024, Calogero Ricotta murdered his wife Maria and her 14-year-old stepson Joshua in their Essex home. But this wasn't a sudden explosion of violence, it was the culmination of years of sustained psychological abuse, threats, and control. Calogero had controlled and gaslighted Maria throughout their relationship, systematically eroding her sense of self-worth and reality. He threatened violence repeatedly, creating an atmosphere of constant terror. When Maria tried to leave, he would shift tactics, luring her back with false displays of kindness and remorse. Then he would wait for a moment of vulnerability and the cycle would intensify. On that January day, he attacked Maria, and when young Joshua tried to protect his mother, Calogero murdered him too. The case highlighted how desperately we need better intervention systems to protect abuse victims before manipulation escalates to murder. Case 1. Benjamin Fields' Complete Web. Our number 1 case brings together 2 stories we've already discussed, revealing the full, calculated scope of Benjamin Fields' predation. Field didn't target one person. He systematically gaslighted and plotted against multiple vulnerable people simultaneously, refining his techniques with each victim. Field's method was chillingly consistent. Identify someone lonely and vulnerable, gain their complete trust through romance or spiritual manipulation, then systematically destroy their grip on reality through drugs, fake divine messages, and isolation from anyone who might intervene. With Peter Farquhar, he succeeded in murder. With Anne Moore Martin, he was actively plotting the same outcome when investigators finally connected the dots. What makes this case our number 1 isn't just the calculated cruelty or the multiple victims, it's how perfectly it illustrates every single stage of manipulation escalating to murder. Field identified vulnerable targets based on specific criteria. He exploited their deepest needs and beliefs with precision. He isolated them from protective support systems. He made them doubt their own minds and memories. And then he moved toward eliminating them entirely, while positioning himself to inherit their estates. The case revealed that gaslighting isn't just emotional abuse. It's often premeditated groundwork for something far worse. These 10 cases reveal a pattern that should terrify and educate us. Manipulation doesn't happen in isolation, and it rarely stays purely psychological. If these stories resonated with you, if you recognize warning signs in your own life or someone else's, please reach out to resources. You're not imagining it. You're not overreacting. Your instincts matter, and help exists. Which case stayed with you the most? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below, and if you want to explore more about recognizing manipulation and coercive control, check out our latest video right here. We post new deep dives every week. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.